All right, so we are live. Hello to everyone who's watching this episode. It's the first interview that we are doing on this YouTube channel. So I've decided to name it the Brevity Hypothesis because over the past many years, I've realized that brevity, which is the concise use of words in speech, is very important in what we do because that really helps clarify ambiguity in a lot of areas, and especially in your careers where clarity of thought is everything. I think brevity plays a very important role. And this channel is created on that hypothesis that providing clear and actionable information from people who have a lot of experience in their domain will really help with your journey. So with that note, we'll get started. And before introducing our guest, I would like to call out a very short disclaimer that the thoughts and opinions that we are sharing and exchanging throughout this interview are purely based on our own experience, and they are not referring to any organization that we're currently or previously have worked in. So it's just an effort to share our knowledge and have a discussion around something that can be helpful for those who are watching. So, with that note, I'll introduce our guest for today, Ramprasad. So, thank you, Ramprasad, for joining. And just little bit of background to why I have invited and requested Ram to join our first interview. So, I have worked with Ram for the past couple of years, and we have both worked as a part of the same team very closely. And it has been a really good experience working with him because of the kind of experience that he brings to the table, the kind of insights that he has, and the kind of approach that he has to his work, his philosophy about his domain of expertise, which is experience design. And observing and just being a part of his thought process has really helped shape my role as a business analyst. And over the past couple of years, we've really been able to have a lot of interesting conversations about what's the right way to solve problems, and just what's the right approach of what is the right way to approach our respective roles. So knowing Ram, I know that he has accumulated a vast experience across a different number of fields. So the thing that motivated me to uh, you know just pull him in for this interview was to share his experience to the world and see where it might be useful for those who are watching. So welcome to this interview, Ram. Thank you for accepting. How are you?
Thanks a lot, Rahul. Thanks for the introduction. And first of all, thank you so much for hosting this nice podcast series, Brevity Hypothesis. And it's a pleasure being on this, first call of the series. Good luck for the podcast, and seeing a lot of amazing speakers, and you're an amazing host by yourself. And I think like the way Rahul was giving an intro to me, and I've also thoroughly enjoyed working with Rahul. In the past couple of years, and looking forward for an amazing conversation today.
Thank you so much, Ram. All right. So I think we'll start off with the first section, which is to familiarize what you have done to our audience. So could you talk a little bit briefly uh, about who you are, and a little bit, and if you can give us a little bit of background to your experience, that will really help set the tone for the rest of the interview.
Sure, Rahul. So, hi everyone. Like Rahul has been introducing, I'm Ram Prasad. You could call me Ram. So currently, I'm a user experience designer or an experience designer with this company called ThoughtWorks, where Rahul and I work together. Uh, my design journey probably was an act of it just happened by chance. So I was brought up in Chennai, and like a lot of people at that time, the initial rush is towards engineering, and then for some reason I landed up taking electrical and electronics engineering. So while yes, I was preparing for a lot of entrance examinations, and then I had a lot of interest in aerospace at that time. While I don't know why I took electrical and electronics, but it all happened just like that. That was a time where you choose a branch where you have no idea what you're doing, and somewhere close to the second year or third year of my engineering, I came to this realization that probably I should have taken mechanical engineering or something like that, where it was too late to realize, half of your BE or BTech is already over. And that is when it hit my head really hard that I'm probably wired for something even more physical and more of, solid in terms of the kind of work that I can do. And maybe I'm not made up for a circuit branch kind of work. And I very much struggled in trying to understand those. And in fact, during my engineering, I was pretty good at solid mechanics, fluid mechanics, strength of materials, and all of that. And I used to score really well in those examinations compared to my own, circuit branches like integrated circuits or digital logic and all of that. Though I could go through, but probably I realized that that was not my strong area. So after my engineering, the usuals, you do your engineering, you get started with a software job. I joined a software company and I was working there for 1 year. And by the time I was already planning to do my master's, I wanted to change my area of work, and I could see that I wanted to switch to something which interested me. So while exploring options in terms of post graduation, I was mainly aiming to do an MTech. I was preparing for GATE and aiming for the IITs. But at some point, I was exposed to this domain or area of work called design, which I was not that aware of at that point. So and I came to know about this examination called SEED, that is the Common Entrance Examination for Design, which is very similar to GATE, the Graduate Aptitude Test in Engineering. So this exam is conducted by the same GATE offices for all of the IITs. So when I went through the program specifications and I got to do a little bit more research, and that was the days of Orkut, where I tried to connect with a lot of people in the Orkut who had did their masters in design from different IITs. So when I got to know what kind of work it is, and what the industry is, how you can, and interestingly how design is interdisciplinary in its own sense, and a lot of other backgrounds can try to channelize themselves, while there are also a lot of people who do their bachelor's in design and then go ahead. So that's the way I got to know about design. And while I was working for a year with HCL as a software engineer, I just wrote these examinations and got through. And I went to pursue my master's, that is master's in design MDes from IIT Guwahati. And interestingly, that's where I met my better half as well. So she was also my classmate there, and interestingly, our all India ranks were also the same. So that's just my personal life trivia on that front. So yeah, it was a 2-year program, and my focus was on the kind of design called industrial design. And I think in majority of this podcast, we're going to talk about design that is more towards the IT sector. But during my studies, yeah, I was concentrating in industrial design, which is more towards design related to physical artifacts or physical products like furniture, automobile, and things like that. So that was pretty much on my higher studies. And then campus placement again. So I joined Mindtree as a UX designer. That was my first design role per se. Uh, well, it was a switch for me. Industrial design is more on the physical objects and front, but the job at Mindtree was towards the software side of it. So commonly probably known as UX these days, while UX is user experience, but I made the transition from a physical to digital user experience. So after that, I continued working with multiple organizations. So slowly, right now, I'm aligned towards working with product teams rather than services, rather than more of a consulting role. I these days I'm enjoying being with a product team and building products with product teams. So that's pretty much my journey into design. And then all these years I've been working with different kinds of products and teams. Yeah, that's pretty much.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Ram. I think your journey sums up two Bollywood movies, a little bit of Three Idiots and a little bit of Two States. So I think that's a very interesting combination. A lot of engineering grads will especially resonate with your experience with you know being in one stream but having a fascination or interest towards others, because a lot of the times I have personally seen that a lot of students, especially in hardcore engineering courses like mechanical or civil engineering, they're actually very good at coding, and they choose to transition to IT jobs later on in their careers. So that's pretty interesting. Now, if you can go a little bit deeper into this, right? So you're in an engineering course, and I think you briefly touched upon it. But what was it that triggered your passion towards design, and was there any specific incident that made you feel that okay, I think design is the way to go for me?
Cool. Yes, yes. So there were those days where the switch, or at least the turn towards even being exposed to design happened. So while I was preparing for GATE, even before all these kind of things, I was mainly trying to make a switch into aerospace. So in India, we do have freedom to switch, majors at a postgraduate level, but the chances of choosing your specialization is pretty limited. For example, if you come from a circuit branch, you can't just like that jump into aerodynamics or propulsion. So if you were to get into aerospace, you should probably get into control and instrumentation, or dynamics and control, avionics, and those kind of things. So I was mainly targeting to at least switch from the circuit branch side into aerospace, so that I can at least make a career for myself in aerospace. While I was speaking to a lot of people who have done that, probably pursued something outside of India or in any of the existing IITs. So that is the time where I was going through the website of each of the IITs to understand, what are the different departments, and what's the coursework, what are the research areas, and all of that. That is where I got to see some of. I mean, not all of the IITs have a design department. I mean, the industrial design or interaction design department, some of them have. So the ones that had, they created some curiosity in me. And what is this department, right? So the usuals. There is mechanical, electrical, electronics, control, biotechnology, metallurgy, and then certainly there are these departments called Department of Design, right? And so that's where, when I try to go through the faculty profile, the kind of work that happens, the kind of events that happen, so that opened up a new door to me to think of what this means. And then, like I was saying, when I started talking to people on Orkut and started connecting with some of the alumni of different IITs who had done a design masters. So that opened up a lot of thinking in me on what is this area of work, and how is it closely married to engineering by itself, while at the same time it is on the innovation front, and trying to solve problems for people, and putting people at the center. How come this area of work, or kind of work, or a profession is exists in its nature? So that is the point where I could say I was exposed to design, or design as a discipline. And I think after that, what followed is further research, and talking to different people. So some amount of networking to understand what is in different, what do different kinds of designers do. I think we'll be covering that in some time. So yeah, so and from my childhood I was good at sketching. So that when I got to know that design is a domain, or a design is a profession where sketching is an integral part of it, where you visualize ideas, come up with solutions, kill ideas, recreate them, and all of that. So I think that all fell well in place. So while since childhood I was just aimlessly drawing and sketching, and then when you get to know that in a profession like design, sketching is a formal process by itself. So I think things fell in place. And anyway, I was completely like I was saying, my own fascination to mechanical engineering comes from the fact that I'm more of a special and three-dimensional person in terms of visualization, which I could not realize when I was in 12th, though I was good at 3D geometry and all of that. So I think that was the point where I realized that fine. So I did my undergrad in a circuit branch major, but now I think this is a great switch, or this is probably a chance to undo some of those and then redo at a master's level. Probably that was my turning point. And mainly I would give all the credit to the people with whom I networked. And I mean, you wouldn't call it professional networking, but casually talking to people who are alumni, and looking at the research areas in the different schools of design and stuff.
Right. I think that it's great that you mentioned that, because one of the things that I personally see is having someone out there who you can connect with, and identifying someone who can give you the right advice can actually solve half your problems, because there is no starting point, right? You don't know whether it's the right thing for you, and it doesn't come as a surprise that you wanted to move. You were very fascinated by avionics because, for those who don't know, I think you have a very good collection of model fighter aircrafts as well. It's a growing collection, so it's not surprising to me at all. uh, so moving on, I think let's get into the main part of it, right? Um, so there is a lot of noise out there today around what design is, what design, who designers are, you know, what skills they should possess. And while we will cover that throughout the course, let's start off by talking about what exactly is design and what is your philosophy about design. Because over the past many years, of course, when you would have started learning design, you would have been influenced by a lot of professors. There would have been a lot of dogma, right? Like you'll be living with their thinking for a while initially, and there will be a lot of textbookish definitions to design that you would have learned for your exams probably. But when you spend as much time as you have in the real world, how has your definition of design changed? Like today, if somebody wanted to understand from you what exactly is design, what would you say to them?
Cool. I think it's nice the way you put it in terms of textbook definition. So I think over time, over a few years, I got a chance to work with some amazing people. I think where I'm probably settling right now with what is my definition of design is, I think as human beings we have always been designers on by ourselves, right? The way we have evolved, starting from the way we invented the wheel or discovered fire, everything is an act of design. Now, any constructive act, any constructive or creative act that can solve problems for human beings and that can make life better for the human beings as well as the nature around us, I think that is design. So in naturally human beings are wired to be designers. You know, as human beings we solve problems very creatively. We know how to look at situations, and design has been all around us, right? So design as a discipline or a field of study and a profession is one thing, but there is always an act of design happening in every realm of our life, right? Starting from uh, designing organizations are made in a certain way, right? They are designed with an intent of how they should be structured. Policies are designed, governments are designed, services, healthcare, everything is designed in a certain way, right? And at all times the human beings are at the center, or at least the environment is at the center. So I think, yeah, that's probably my definition of design. If I were to see, keep aside the professional way of describing and what a designer does, I think any act of constructive problem solving, or changing the way we work or trying to alter our circumstances so that our life improves, I think it's an act, it's design by itself. When it comes to philosophy of design, I think I'm probably not carrying a very strong or a rigid or concentrated philosophy every day, but maybe I can talk through what has influenced me over the time. Starting from design school, I think I've been fortunate to be under the guidance of some nice faculty who have influenced my thinking, and also the kind of the knowledge from the design history and how design has evolved as a field, and the whole process of design has evolved over time from the industrial revolution. I think I think this is just individual. People can have varying thoughts with different professionals. So my understanding and my if I were to say my principle around design would be that I'm a strong believer of form follows function, where I tend to put utility and function first before we start looking at how things look, because I would like to connect it to the whole misconception that design is all about good looking things. At the same time, function and aesthetics is an integral part of the design process, where anything that gets designed by human beings needs to be tastefully done as well. So poor aesthetics should not be an excuse to run behind functionality. Design by itself as an activity is a blend of form and function, while function comes first, and you ensure that you add value to human life. At the same time, you make something beautiful and a pleasure to use. So that's probably, if I were to even say that as a philosophy, a very common philosophy a lot of designers have. And over while studying design, I think I was heavily influenced by the Bauhaus school of thought, and where good examples like Dieter Rams and Le Corbusier, they have been some influences on how I perceive design and how I shape my learning during academics. So probably I could that's probably it. I mean, design did had a lot of revolutions and changes, from the I mean, if you look at the design history timeline, everything from art and craft or art nouveau, and then the modernism and everything. I mean, a lot of things changed from the industrial revolution, mechanization of things and stuff. I think I probably fell in love with that stage where the German school of thought of functionality and how minimalism also stemmed up from those school of thought. I think I'm a little more still connected to that, where I think even if someone throws up an application or a mobile app or something where a lot of things are flashing and shining and all of those amazing corners and radius, but in the end, uh, you need to look at whether what you build is meeting the needs of people and is it fit to use. I think you need to blend aesthetics along with that rather than seeing aesthetics and functionality as two different things. So, and still in the order, functionality comes first, and you can find your way through building something beautiful as well. So I don't know if that tries to answer the question you had in terms of philosophy and my outlook towards design.
It definitely does. So I had read somewhere that somebody had mentioned in an article that I was reading that design is intelligence exposed, right? And I think that that also sits very well with what you said, that it's a creative process and set of actions that can actually solve a problem and help simplify things. So one thing that I take away from your answer is our approach to design also has to be very fluid. There cannot be any objective definition of design, and it probably changes the situation. So is it fair to say that design is a very subjective thing, and with the and it changes with the industry or the kind of atmosphere that we work in? Is it a fair statement to say?
Okay, I actually wouldn't say that design is subjective. So, like in design by itself as a problem solving profession or an activity, while in its core, that's what it does, right? In general, I mean, we'll definitely cover that when we go into the IT part of it, which is of more interest to a lot of audience who you're trying to cater. But in terms of an activity, design basically tries to simply keep people at the center, right? Users and human beings at the center. And there are a lot of techniques and there are a lot of toolkits and methods in which design processes, which shares a lot of commonalities. I mean, in fact, design is derived by a lot of other disciplines by itself,
Mhm.
right? Anthropology, cognitive psychology, material science, engineering, everything, human factors, everything is involved into design. So put it very simple, I know, I'm not going by the cliche linear representation. Even if I were to break it down into some logical sequences, not going by very formal representations of it, understanding people, studying people in their context, looking at people's behaviors, what if understanding what their needs are, what problems they face, deploying any form of techniques to understand what people go through on a typical day, right? And then trying to frame that out into different problem statements, taking those problem statements, without any biases, trying to synthesize that, evolve your design brief from that, and then start solving those by ideation or coming up with a lot of alternatives on how can we fix a certain problem or a set of problems. Taking those ideas, prototyping, be it I mean, I'm talking domain agnostic or design discipline agnostic, where even if you're a UX designer or a industrial designer or ceramic designer, whatever you are, this is going to be very common to what you do. You test those solutions with real people, and then try to iterate on those solutions in terms of need fitment, in terms of ease of use, and then the process goes on, right? You shape up your solution to its maximum possible shape, where you're to go and market it, you're good to go and sell it, right? If you're on a business model or whatever you're going to do about it. So I think in the end, this skeleton remains the same. So that way, design as an activity or a process is that's what it is. But it can change based on the design discipline. Probably a little bit it might change. So, for example, the skeletal process remains the same, but what you do at different stages can vary a little bit. So, for example, if we were to talk about automobile design, right? So automobile design, there is a lot of emphasis on form development. So where automobile styling is an integral part of automobile design by itself, apart from new vehicle architectures or new vehicle development or new ways of transportation in general. So you might find a lot more emphasis in terms of the form itself, because the way a vehicle is designed, the surfaces, the curves that go into design of a car or an automobile, that has got a lot to do with the brand presence, right? Starting from how you design the grills to the lamps, to the different identity lines that come on the surface of the car, everything forms an identity for a brand. So for example, Jaguar will have certain key character lines on the car which will always be preserved no matter how many years those cars evolve. Or maybe evolution of those lines is a conscious decision the Jaguar design team might want to think about. And in the same way, you pick up some other brand, they have very very key character lines on their cars. Now this is the process remains the same. The automobile designers do a lot of research, they do a lot of synthesis, they build mood boards. The process remains the same. Now there can be some bumps and lows in terms of what you do based on what you're trying to build, right? So and then yeah, so that's a good example of of one of the design professions. If we were to take the kind of user experience design that we're going to talk about, that is interface design. So the stages might be a little different. So if we were to test, automobile designers might do the different kind of testing when it comes to their sketches or proposals, or probably even clay models and things like that. So what is the consumer outlook towards a certain styling or a form factor to a vehicle, while an interface designer might be busy in trying to do some usability testing on the UI, right, where you built the interface in a certain way and you really want to see is it fit to use or not. While a same counterpart is also there in automobile engineering, which is the human factors and HMI, that is human machine interactions, where your dashboard and your car interiors need to be usable, right, in
Right.
terms of your headroom clearances and your leg room, usability in terms of how much cognitive load falls on you when you're driving the car. All of those serious considerations go into it when you actually build an entire car. So I think there is a lot of wavering overlaps and exclusive activities in certain design professions, and then they might not be there in certain other professions. But in the bottom line, I think the process is all the same. It's in the end, it's creative problem solving, building things for people, coming up with solutions for people, built by people. That's how I would like to put it in terms of subjective or objective nature of design.
Okay, right. So to summarize what you're saying, basically, the workflow that you actually follow or the framework that you follow remains the same, but based on the type of problems that you're solving, probably there can be little variations here and there. Got it. All right. So now that we have the the concept of design clear, let's move on to a lot of misconceptions and myths that surround the field of design, right? So just to prepare a little bit for this conversation, I was going through a lot of job descriptions on LinkedIn, where organizations have put out for recruiting designers. Now, while a lot of the titles say experience design or UX design, a lot of the job description um, that's detailed out actually resonates a lot with knowing tools rather than actually the skills that they're looking for, right? Like um, and just as an example, I think there was a job opening which said that they're looking for UX designers, but actually the skills and tools that they had asked for was related to graphic design, right? Like tools like Photoshop or probably Lightroom, etc. So these are the kind of misconceptions or even myths that design is just about beautifying things and making them look good, right? I think these are the kind of misconceptions and myths that we see very regularly. Both of us have also spoken about it very often, during our conversations as well. So what are some of the common misconceptions and myths that uh, anyone looking to get into design should not get influenced by or biased by, or even if somebody who wants to know more about design should probably have these myths busted for them? So what would you say are the most common misconceptions and myths that surround design?
Okay, I think this is a very interesting topic. We can go on this topic, but probably I'll try to cover some of the key ones that can be of very much interest to people who might be the audience for this podcast, right?
Sure.
So I'll probably start with the one that you pointed out in the JDs that you said you saw, right? So I think. Or probably with the beautifying side of things. So yes, this is definitely a very broader myth that has enveloped a lot of organizations or even teams in general, people in general. that making an interface beautiful is probably seen as design and nothing else. While the myth busting that we need to do here is, yes, definitely creating an aesthetically pleasant and a tastefully done interface is part of design. That is an important role for a designer, and they should definitely do it because they are trained to do so. But the part where people need to come out of that myth is should connect to the part that we just spoke now in the beginning of what is design all about, right? In terms of problem solving, in terms of understanding people. So design is a very much a people profession. It's so much of a people profession. In fact, if you're not a people profession, I would say give it a thought to become one if you really want to get into a career into design, right? So the myth that has to be broken there is that it's not just about. I mean, the role of design is not just about so-called beautifying. You can do tastefully well-designed interfaces, and for example, and I think when people talk about beauty, they're talking about visual design already here, right?
Yes.
So people also need to understand that visual design is not just about beauty, while visual design is very scientific by itself. Graphic design and communication design hold a lot of science in what a designer does. Let me not jump into a spree of talking about graphic design altogether. So, for example, color theory on why certain colors go well with each other, why certain colors don't go well with each other, how do you use typography with color. So there's a lot of science that goes into why certain choices are made, because to the common eye that is not a trained designer, it can simply feel that think these things don't go well with each other. So why do things don't go well with each other, right? So it goes back to optics. It goes back to color physics basically on why a certain wavelength does not go well with a certain wavelength, right? So that is the and then how a certain color in the background can engulf your foreground color and then take over and then how do you maintain contrast ratios and all of that. So visual design by itself is very scientific, and it goes all the way till accessibility and other sides of it, where that is a lot of serious work. So when you put these principles of visual design in order, whatever comes out is always pleasant to the eye. So what people consider as looking beautiful or not looking beautiful, a lot of thinking goes in making that beauty happen. So if you have a visually appealing application in front of you, there is a lot of thought that has gone in to create that effect. So it's not by chance or it's not by experience. Yes, people
Exactly.
start doing that by experience, but there's a lot of thinking that goes on why a certain typographic hierarchy in terms of
Right.
text character sizes, what works out and what doesn't work out, right? And those kind of things. So yeah, the myth there is that design is not just about beautifying. And in fact, my honest request to people would be, don't go to a designer and then tell them to beautify it. Tell them how do we make this better, right? They'll tell you what's better because they're trained to do so. No worries if you're not trained to do so, but people can always help you out in terms of because the intent of visual design is predominantly communication. It's communication design. Graphic design is communication design, and be it you build an application, you're creating a poster, you're creating wayfinding and signages in the airport, whatever, anything visual that you're doing, anything is gonna be consumed by people by looking through their eyes is communication design. And there is always a strong foundation of why certain things happen in a certain way, including things like iconography. When you create icons and symbols, a lot of thought goes into how do you order things. In fact, I can keep going all day. Magazine design, book design, layouts, there's a lot that goes in terms of a lot of scientific principles that drive what choices go in. So I think that's a myth. It's a very good myth to be broken on. It's not just about beauty. Beauty is a part of the journey. It comes along through the consciously made design decisions and iterations. Beauty is derived. Beauty comes as one of the end outcomes apart from delivering a functionality. So if you
Yeah.
take a poster, sorry, go on.
Just pausing you there. Like I think we need to stress the importance of that point, right? Like as you mentioned about the color theory, so one example that we can take is why are a lot of the chairs in the food courts of malls predominantly in red and orange color? So there is a theory that those two colors trigger the feeling of hunger in the human brain. So it's basically used to trigger a certain reaction. And one point that you made seems very interesting to me, which is beauty is just a byproduct, right? It's a part of that process. And I think people, it resonates a lot with people because that's a clear indicator that the design has actually worked a lot and it's successful. But that's the only thing that's visually seen to people. I think a lot of the background functionality and thought process that has actually made that level of impact, that stays hidden. I think since beauty is the only tangible thing that they can take it out of, that they can take out of those experiences, I think that's what influences a lot of that. So yeah, please go on. Yeah, you were saying about the poster design aspect.
Correct. Yeah. So poster design is a good example in graphic design where the intent is communication, right? The functionality of a poster is to communicate a message. Now that can be a social message, it can be an ad campaign, it can be anything, right? So the message is the functionality, and a well aesthetically balanced and well thought through a composition and execution is an integral part of it. So beauty is part of the journey, while the objective of a poster is not just to make a beautiful poster. It's about having an impactful message in probably you blend it with some humor, you blend it with some you play around with the visual element, and then there's an intelligently done execution of composition towards it. So that way I think functionality is always an integral part of design. And if we were to even talk about design in the IT space, jumping into applications or software products, right? So again, it's design is not just going to be beautifying the interfaces or getting the color schemes right or putting the buttons in place. So that's just probably a small part of it. It's there all around, it's a part of it. But the important, probably we'll cover it in the subsequent parts of the podcast as well, is design has to be from the very beginning. Design is not something that you fit almost in the extreme end, saying that okay, we are done with the product, we are done with the features, can you just give an identity to it, right? That's not the way it works. So design is supposed to be from the very beginning, to understand what problem we are trying to solve, what we are trying to build, the requirement gathering, working with the team, the BA and the product manager and everyone. And that's how design is supposed to be. While I think a lot of organizations have understood that, some organizations are still struggling, some teams are still struggling to understand that. But I think the future looks very promising, where design is definitely going to play a very big role from an end-to-end perspective.
Got it. Got it. All right. So, and I think with that note, it's very important that we again stress those aspiring designers as well, to not just focus on the aspects like aesthetics and looks alone, and also for non-designed roles also to kind of look a little bit deeper into what the field is all about, rather than just uh, I would say probably burdening designers with responsibilities that are not theirs, like just small works like just beautifying things. It's not necessarily something that designers do, right? It's something that's a byproduct or a part of the journey. And I think there is a lot of maturity and a lot of refinement of thought that needs to come in that space, going forward, for those who really want to get into design. And I think generally itself, across industries, I think that knowledge is yet to be built. So glad that we spoke about it. Uh, Now, going into the IT industry aspect of it, of course, there is design in every space, whether it be the automotive space or the aerospace industry, or automotive industry, whatever we want to cover, right? Let's talk specifically about the IT industry, because I see that a lot of students these days are going into hardcore IT courses, whether it can be engineering in computer science or IT, or sandwich courses, whatever it may be. But then they're choosing to venture into the design space. So while they learn coding and a lot of tech for their duration, they generally make that jump to a more creative space, right? So while that's sort of becoming the trend now, let's talk a little bit about what the role of design and designers is when it comes to the IT industry. So let's talk about the role of design first, and then let's talk about what the role of designers in the IT industry.
Cool. So I think it's the last topic was good to pick up from there. Having said that, design is not just about beauty, and it's more about the end to end. Design has to exist end to end in your entire process of solution making and problem framing. So when it specifically now if we were to keep aside all the other design professions, there are a lot of design professions out there, very tactile ones and the digital ones. So we're going to probably, like you said, if we were to look at just IT, uh, I'll probably start with a little bit of history of how the IT oriented design specializations or roles shaped up. Uh, so, in based on my understanding, it all started with the domain of human computer interaction. So, human computer interaction, HCI, as it is properly known, while a lot of people think that that is extremely academic. While it is academic, there is a lot of academics around that front. There is a lot of research happening, but HCI is not just academic in nature. So whatever research happens in HCI is what comes out as new technology and innovation. So HCI was, I think, if I'm not wrong, it started somewhere around the 70s or 80s, where uh, computing, the age of computing took really high at a certain point, where Apple brought in personal computers, and when that uh, kind of thing started. Uh, this was a field that needed attention in terms of enabling human beings interact with computers. That is what human computer interaction is. So the whole birth of the cursor and the mouse and the keyboard, the different kinds of inputs. Today we are talking about touchscreens, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, gesture-based interactions. So now that was a point where the whole thinking of how do we make humans interact with computers had its birth, right? So the keyboard, the various input devices, what does it mean to have text input? What does it mean to have direct and indirect manipulation? All of those were given birth when HCI as a term was coined, and as a field started coming up, where it is and it was very scientific. So basically, there's an interesting book, if the audience would like to go through, if people are interested in trying to study. It is this book called Designing Interactions by Bill Mogridge. The author is unfortunately no more. So it's an amazing book. He's a design educator and one of the pioneers in HCI. So Bill Mogridge's book Designing Interactions is probably a primer if you want to venture into interaction design for starters. So it's a pretty interesting book. You can keep reading it over and over, and it's very inspiring to see the kind of thinking that has gone in from the time where computing devices were at their very beginning in terms of how do we build computers, right? And that's a time about Apple, Microsoft, IBM, Xerox PARC. So how did people build computers, and how did people design how human beings should work with computers or handle computers? So that journey started, and in fact, all of the interface manifestations that we have today is a result of HCI. While user experience, UX, uh, is what people go through, right? So you can use a device or a digital equipment or anything and have a good user experience or a bad user experience. Now, whether it is designed well or not is what says whether it's a good UX or a bad UX. So UX comes from that, that initial journey, and it's UX is closely related to HCI. So I wouldn't see both as very different. Though there is a lot of academic research happening, there's a lot of R&D happening in the HCI space, and every form of a new technology development is closely tied to the kind of research people do on the HCI space. So if we were to talk about what role now design is going to play, so taking a typical IT setup, let's talk about product and services, right? Product companies or service companies, both kinds of environments. Design, like we were talking about, not being just in the end, you don't just stamp it in the end. It has to be end to end. Design has a big role to play to understand from a services context. Design has got a role to play to understand the customer's needs to start with. We're not talking users yet, even to understand what the customer, so as in by customer we are talking about the person who's going to pay for your service as a services company, and in the end they've got some users whom they are answerable to and who they are going to deliver something, right? Or probably their users are paying them, and these customers are going to pay you for building software basically. So designers got a role to play in terms of even facilitating that conversation with the clients, right? So basically trying to understand what the customer is trying to ask for to start, right? When your sales pitches are going on, you've got a customer on board. So now we are trying to figure out what do they want, right? What problem they want to solve. So those conversations through different techniques and in the design toolkit can be employed. Workshops are just one of them. There are a lot of other ways in which you can try to understand what the customer wants. Literally, I just want to put it within quotes, at least what the customer is trying to say that what they want to build. Now what their users need is going to be another exercise to even really go and find out. So it starts there. The moment let's say your customer says that you know what, we want to build an in-flight application, or probably a flight ticket booking application, to keep it very simple. Now, yes, great. So that's what that business wants to build. Now, obviously, they want to monetize. They're looking for profitability. They really they really aspire to build a good flight ticket booking application. Great. So now, what design has to do now is, I'm just trying to rush through, given the size of the duration of the podcast. I'm not jumping into all the details. So now design has got a role to play in now going deeper and understanding who the users of your customer's application are. So now your customer says that they want to build a flight ticket booking application. Now in the end, it's going to be prospective passengers who are going to come and use their flight booking application, right? So who are they? They're basically people who want to travel, who want to have an airline journey, right? So now design has got a role to play to go and study the life of those people who are going to book tickets in your flight ticket booking application. Now that opens up a lot of activities under the umbrella of user research, or studying your users basically, and trying to understand what are the challenges, what are their needs, how is their current context of use, how is your competition landscape. So I mean, I took an example of flight booking app. There are a lot of flight booking apps, right? What are your competitors doing? So it's a very it's a very strategic activity at that point. So you're trying to understand what people's needs are, and that is going to shape up, user research is going to shape up what problems you're trying to solve, what opportunities do you have, right? How can now we are talking about a services company, how can we intervene as a tech company and then build solutions, right? What problems are we trying to solve at the moment for your customer, and in turn mainly the users of your customer, who are people who are booking tickets. So that's still part of the design activity. And over that, there are a lot of techniques. User research is a mix of a lot of interesting techniques. I mean, I think people have commonly heard a lot about user interviews and contextual inquiry. There are a lot more techniques that your technique is based on your intent and what kind of insights you want to derive from your target user group, and the technique has to change based on what you're trying to do at what stage of your project. So let's say we are done with a lot of user research, and that's going to give us a lot of insights on what possibilities we can provide in terms of from our understanding of things on the ground, right? So that gives us an avenue of opportunities to step in and solve problems for. So in the end of that exercise, you basically get a lot of insights, and where are the things broken in the end-to-end journey of a ticket booking experience, where things can be made better, what innovation can you do to uplift the entire ticket booking experience, right? So yeah, so that's one part of where you try to understand the problem. And then once you have a problem statement, what comes next is trying to elaborate it even further, right? So this is where the requirement phase starts in, where design has to work closely with product management or the business analyst, key stakeholders, where you shape up the requirement based on what problem statement has come up, or set of problem statements have come up from the studies. And along with that goes in things like ideation, where okay, if these are the 7 or 8 set of problem cues or problem statements that are thrown at us, so how do we solve it? It can be a collaborative exercise. Designers can facilitate those sessions, or designers can think in silos or come back and then regroup. I mean, it all depends on the context. It depends on what you're trying to do at different stages. But broadly, if we were to call it as an ideation stage, you try to develop as many ideas as possible without any bias, right? We're not saying that, okay, oh no, if we build a chatbot, something else is going to happen. Oh no, if we build a portal, something else is going to happen. We don't jump into those conclusions. You know, to just go with the flow, be as creative as possible. And yes, evaluation, you test those ideas. Now, be it you're trying to build an interface by itself, or you're trying to evaluate ideas at a very, very abstract stage as part of an ideation workshop, everything is going to be about design, right? So yeah, you evaluate ideas, you try to pick the ideas that are worth pursuing, and then you detail that out even further. That's where I'm really rushing through. I know this is really, really fast. There are a lot of things that go in, but yeah, then comes the core interface design part, where okay, if you pick a certain set of ideas and they are viable, they are going to be adding value, they are the best ideas to go ahead with based on whatever evaluation framework you had in terms of those ideas. Now, when you try to really expand and detail out those ideas, then comes the part where you're going to trying to knit an entire end-to-end journey for that idea, right? So when we said it's going to be a flight ticket booking application, now we are talking about screens, right? I mean, since we are specifically focusing on IT and app development and all of that. So okay, what are these end-to-end screens, right? What was the user journey looking like when we did research on the field in terms of how people go through that process, and we discovered some problems there. And then if we were to solve those problems with that user journey, or maybe make that user journey better, so how do you think of a digital journey for that in terms of screens or interfaces or devices, whatever be the direction in which we are going in the current project? But that is where things go into a lot of detail. uh, the stages of sketching and wireframing is going to be intense, where you try out a lot of combinations, you iterate a lot, you keep sketching and throwing and evaluating while you go. And wireframing is a stage where you're trying to put a skeleton to the idea that is maturing up, as a team or through your evaluation. Now, a wireframe is not an end to it. A wireframe is just a representation of an end-to-end journey, while the most important part is to take the wireframe or a prototype. I mean, both are different, but for the sake of this conversation, let's stick to wireframes. So a wireframe is a representation of what an interface is going to do, or at least what you're aiming to achieve out of that. Now, wireframes are great for internal communications for sure. So, like for example, if you want to have a conversation with your product manager or a set of developers to look at to study the feasibility of an idea, a wireframe is a great start. And reasonably well done wireframes, you can take it to real end users and do some testing. While testing by itself does not need to wait for wireframes. You can do user testing at any part of your journey, starting from paper sketches to wireframes to completely done polished visual design, based on what you want to get as feedback from users, or at least take as cues based on what you're testing for. This is fidelity, basically low fidelity, medium fidelity, and high fidelity. I know I'm bombarding with a lot of jargons, but basically it's the amount of detail and finesse with which you stitch an idea, right? So you can sketch on paper, but you can sketch really well, and that can also be a starting point to take it to users and test those ideas. So for example, especially when you want to test things around having a feature or not, right? So for example, I know this is I mean, what is this? So let me put a hypothetical example. So let's say in your application, one of the ideas you have is showing. I mean, I know this is very this is not a great example. So similar to how e-commerce does, people who bought this also bought this, right? Maybe somebody in your team came up with this idea saying that okay, people who booked these tickets also booked here, right? Now, I mean maybe it doesn't make sense to users, but if you put that as a feature there, and then when you get to know that that feature is useless, so you don't need to build that. So on a sketch stage, you can already shoot down that, saying that okay, this makes no sense to people. I mean, the focus here is to book a certain journey from a source and from a source to a destination, and they want to click the number of passengers needed, and then the start the journey date, and then what class and all of that, food needed or not, and or probably a tweak whether should I have a layover time or not. That's it, right? So why bombard people with unwanted features now? So these kind of validations can very well happen on a sketch level or a wireframe level, and it doesn't need to wait for creating polished screens. So that way, wireframing and prototyping is an interesting zone by itself, where a lot of things can happen. And probably on a paper sketch level, you don't need to worry about things like usability. While it's good to pay attention, usability testing should can also happen on a paper. But I mean, if you can pay attention to create a usability, not compliant, I mean a design solution that is already taken into account the basic usability principles, that is great. But the intent of a sketch could be very different. It doesn't need to be heavy usability testing at that front, but you can also do. So wireframing, yeah, wireframing comes next, where you're trying to create, I mean, not really polished or completely finished screens that might go to production or front end development, but you're talking about things are getting into shape, right? So maybe on a sketch you did not cover a lot of details. Now you're trying to cover more details around uh, some more details of the interface that are very important, that you want to keep in mind, which otherwise you overlook during a sketch or a paper prototype. Now wireframe, I mean, from left to right, you start adding a lot more details to the interface, right? Wireframing has got its own purposes, and its own role to play in the stage of your process. uh, a lot of task flow oriented changes can be made on a wireframe. So for example, are you thinking of bypassing a certain screen and avoiding a dialogue altogether? Maybe that those kind of decisions can happen on a wireframe, right? So things are on placement. So you're, as part of your iterations or design iterations, maybe you are making a choices around the layout itself. Now wireframe is a very good stage where you can play around with layout and arrive at a layout that works best in terms of the that particular task flow, right? On what goes on left, on what goes on top, and the why behind it. And so it's, at least in my opinion, it's fair to say that you start evaluating usability a little more when you move towards the wireframe stage.
Right.
So yeah, and then so on. So visual design, the last part of it, and in fact a lot of refinement happens here. It's not that you sketch and then you digitize that sketch and that becomes a wireframe, and then you polish that wireframe and then it becomes visual design. It should never be like that. So an end-to-end journey of this activity should always be back and forth, where you make a lot of changes based on what you measure and evaluate, right? So yeah, so this moves on. um, Usability testing is the part where it's about really evaluating through scientific methods. Usability testing is very much scientific. uh, though there are uh, I mean, there are a lot of techniques in usability engineering. So people commonly talk about heuristic evaluation and expert review, where somebody who is a designer or a usability analyst takes a look at the UI across some heuristics, tries to make an evaluation, which is a good technique definitely, but that's not the end of it. So testing with the real users is very important. So usability testing usually goes with a test plan. You have a test schedule, you have a test protocol. You try to create a list of tasks that you want to give your users, and see how they perform on it. And a very interesting part is that a usability testing is not a test of the user, it's a test of the interface that you build, right?
Right.
So if the interface fails in the test, it's not the user who's failing, it's your interface decision that is failing. Maybe you need to rewire it or rework on it. So yeah, usability testing looks at, I mean, to put it in very common terms, and I think my design field counterparts might just make a face at this, is that in a way it's okay to say that you're really trying to say how easy it is to use, right? But that's not all. Easy to use since ease of use is a very abused word here, so I'm using it again. But usability testing tries to see how effective is your decision in terms of interface design. So basically there are things where you observe, there are a lot of things in usability testing, I'll not go into all of those details. You look at there's quantitative as well, there's qualitative as well. You look at where people get logged off, where people are lost, where people are trying to struggle to find a certain feature or a certain entry point or exit point. Everything comes into usability testing. You basically look at, so how do I put it, right? So usability evaluation is basically trying to see how well uh, your interface is designed so that people can get done with their task as smooth as possible, without any blockers or without any choking or without any lag in terms of getting lost somewhere. So there are a lot of criteria that come in terms of different metrics to evaluate usability. But yeah, so that basically looks at how well your UI is designed or your product is designed. I think that yeah, that goes. That's a good end to end if we were to talk about IT. And when it comes to product setups, it's about again, the similar kind of things, but working with a product team and product manager, and that's going to be long lasting. And then, apart from this, design has got a very big role to play, to work with product managers and strategists in terms of the sides of understanding usage, right? So you go live with a product, and then you study adoption, you look at how things are getting used, and designers are supposed to definitely consume that information and derive meaning and insights out of it. And in a lot more cases, usage analytics is not just the metric you go ahead with. You need to complement that with field studies. So because a lot of cases, that does not just tell you what you need to act on, right? So
Yes.
maybe usage analytics says that your adoption or conversion is pretty low, but you need to figure out why it's happening. And now again, the techniques that we started, the usability testing we spoke about, the research we spoke about, everything has to keep going. And the most crucial part here is this is not a linear process. While I spoke, it sounded like linear. Everything has to be a circle. It's going to be a loop that is going to come back again and again. At any point, you will have to definitely go back to a previous stage and then circle back, because every point is going to have a lot of surprises for you. So I think that's a good way of, I don't know if it's a good way, but I think that's the best I could take a stab at. How do you define different? How do you see design in IT? Coming to roles, I think this is pretty straightforward to talk about. So there are a lot of roles, and I'm sure people are completely confused to some extent. So broadly, a UX designer, as it is seen today, in general, a lot of companies employ something called an end-to-end or complete package of a UX designer who does every part of the design stage by themselves. So starting from user research to problem statement definition, synthesis, and then ideation, and then refining those solutions, testing those out, evaluating, refining, and reworking again, and helping through development and launch. Everything, if an individual does, I think that's pretty prevalent these days. But at the same time, there are also organizations that's basically a generalist. So there are organizations where you also have a specialist setup as opposed to a generalist, where now those stages are broken down, where a specialist is going to take care of that, and they're going to work together with each other. So for example, some organizations might have a dedicated user researcher, so whose job is mainly to run user research activities, do field studies, gather insights, come back, work with the team to figure out what the problem is, where we can look at opportunities. So that's a user researcher. The same kind of companies might have specifically someone called an interaction designer or an interface designer, whose role is try to stitch through or think through interface ideas based on the problem statements that we have uncovered, right? That person is mostly an expert in UI design or interface design, basically.
Right.
Maybe they are working on wireframes and they are good at usability as well. Maybe they work with the researcher, to translate the problem statements into concepts and get the thinking going. There might be visual designers who are specialists in terms of, now maybe they are visual designers are probably more into the screen level details of how do you create a UI for a certain set of screens or specifications and dimensions and things like that. Maybe the interaction designer gave a set of wireframes to them. Maybe the visual designer is translating that into the finer details of it, where it's they bring in things like color, typography, layout, composition, you know and especially if it's a product or application for an existing brand, how do you translate the brand guidelines into the interface detail? So that's probably a visual designer. And there can also be usability analysts or usability engineers whose job is only to do usability evaluation, right? Or probably be the guardian of good usability practices and things like that, where let's say an interface is done or a product is already built and launched at any stage. So for example, it can also be an ongoing usability study, right? Where just because you shipped a product and it's live, it's working, it doesn't mean that you end it right there. Your usability evaluation needs to be ongoing. So maybe they test the live product with real users, they set up sessions with people, look at how the testing goes and things like that. So there can be setups where you can have these kind of specialist roles. There are also strategic designers or design strategists, so who might come from existing design backgrounds, or probably even a business and design background in most cases, where their role is a lot more to do with working with a user researcher and a business team, or probably a client partner maybe, or a product owner, and basically their role is trying to see how design can play a very strategic role. In general, yes, design is strategic in nature, but a design strategist is a specialist who has got a lot of business acumen, at the same time can speak the business language, can be in that zone. uh, in most cases, I wouldn't say none of them does that, but in most cases they are not that much attached to the interface details. So there
Okay, so
can be
they
case.
act basically they act as a bridge between the business as well as the different elements or different types of designers, simply purely because they understand best of both worlds. Is that fair to say?
You could say so. You could say so. So, but there are also strategists who might also want to, do the hands-on part as well in terms of the, execution and things like that. But in most cases, if somebody is a strategist by role and designation, I think in the organization, or probably the style of working or the design team setup is in such that their role is more towards the business plus design kind of a setup. I think service designers also fall under that category, where uh, the nuance there is that they bring in a perspective where service design is a field by itself, where they think artifact agnostic. That's the interesting part, where they every form of designer does keep the user at the center, but they try to see how are we trying to create a service ecosystem uh, for our set of users, and everything can be an integral part of it. The way their language goes, they talk about touch points and front stage and backstage. They basically look at what happens in front of the eyes of the user, at the same time what is happening in the background, where they're trying to look at our business as a service offering that can be given to our users or customers. So that's another in a role by itself, on the style and the way in which they work, the kind of techniques they have, they also vary. I think broadly these are some of the design roles I can think of in IT. And then I think in IT itself, you can still have graphic designers who are probably focused specifically on, assets or communications or collaterals or artifacts, where their goal is going to be more around communication within IT, mostly digital as well as some print, something like that. I think
A hint of marketing as well, probably there.
yeah, mostly they might be working with marketing teams, so that's possible. So
Got it. All right. So going back a little bit, I think one analogy that I was thinking in my head is that a lot of great developers that I have worked with over the years, one common aspect that all of them share is even before writing a single line of code, there is a lot of effort that goes into ironing out the entire problem statement. And that's something that applies to design as well. And as you mentioned, I think it's a very iterative process, that nobody can get everything right in the first attempt. There are a lot of scientific stages and methods and processes that you need to follow, and it's very important that we go through that cycle iteratively, because it's not possible at all to get everything or all of the problems extracted in one go, right? Because problems can be surfaced every time you visit it and revisit again, right? It's similar to reading a book, right? If you're reading a very insightful book, it's not that you will be able to grasp all of the information and tidbits and nitty-gritties in the first read. You have to keep revisiting again. And I think with experience design and design in general, I think especially in IT, what I and you have seen is that you need to keep revisiting the problem again and talking to users again to see and validate our understanding of the problem, because we say one thing but we mean something different. I think that's the basic assumption that we need to go with, because a lot of the time also I have personally observed that users usually don't come with problem statements, they come with requirements, and that have been formed through personal experience, bias to some extent, right? So I think a lot of these roles have a very good set of practices and processes that you need to follow. I think it again comes down to process, right? That helps identify and validate our understanding. And I think that's where usability testing also comes into the picture, that only if you follow that process, you will be able to understand whether your perception or understanding of the problem has been correct or not, because these are areas where you're able to iteratively improve over a period of time. So awesome. Um, Another question that I wanted to pose here is, in larger organizations, where there is a really good understanding of the role of designers and the different types of designers, the process is pretty clear. I mean, there are really good organizations where they value and recognize the value that designers bring to the table. But often in smaller organizations or startups, probably there might be situations where designers, or let's say experienced designers or interaction designers who are specialists, are often required to do stretch roles or asked to do stretch roles. And in many cases, probably, let's say, specialist roles like service designers are confused with other roles. So in such situations, what are the challenges that organizations might end up facing if there is a lack of clarity or a lack of distinction between these roles, and what can a designer do in such situations to articulate their value more clearly, so that there is no overlap of roles where and they can focus on their um, areas of expertise better.
Okay. I think I'm not sure if I'm able to really go by the startup example itself, but in general, if I were to touch upon the part where you're talking about the confusion, right? The confusion of who can do what, or what skills somebody brings. Correct me if I'm getting that question right. So where somebody is overloaded with everything, and then how do we basically navigate through who's good at what, or what expertise somebody brings, right? The problems with that kind of I think and I think from the startup side is completely understandable, because you're bootstrapping. Probably you have the budget to hire just one designer, or probably you are your co-founder and then your founder. I mean, that's it, right? Something like that. It's completely understandable that you are hiring someone who can do it all. But the biggest problem there is when you overload them. It's not about workload. When you give them something that when you give a responsibility to designer that they are not good at, your results are going to be very dangerous, right? So for example, it's nothing about that individual. But for example, if someone is not good at user research, while every designer is expected to be a good researcher, because of design not being just about creating interfaces or coming up with solutions. But if someone is not great at user research, and probably their interest, or like we were talking about generalist and specialist, if they want to really specialize to one part of design and become experts in that, and probably continue to an IC role, and then keep becoming a subject matter expert or something like that, if they are loaded with tasks or responsibilities that they are not good at, I think the results are going to be very dangerous to handle. Because for a startup, when your initial user research is happening where your product is not even in the market, while keeping aside the fail fast and learn early philosophy, where you want to go live and then try to you would rather want to learn by building a failed product rather than waiting for that and all of that. If you're doing user research, it's going to be pivotal for your startup, right? You have one or set of multiple ideas that you're trying to nurture, and then find success and add value to people's lives. And if there are hiccups in trying to uncover the problem statement and go deeper into users life, just because not to blame, your designer is probably not an expert in it, right? It's going to be challenging. It's going to be very challenging, because your user research is going to give you a lot of insights of what you are even going to build, right? Or maybe you wouldn't be surprised if your user research says that your product should not be there. Maybe you close down your startup, or change it, move to a different idea, right? That's the whole beauty of user research. A lot of, I mean, people talk about product market fits, but why get the revelation that your product market fit is bad after you struggle, right? So I mean, market is one, but who you're building it for, and then what are their tendencies, what are their needs? That's a very critical piece of information. And let's say your designer is not good at that, right? Maybe they are good at something else. Maybe they are good with interfaces, right? So which means that you need that bridge. You need someone who can play that researcher role. While in general, every designer should be good at research as well, but if the person has made a choice to be a specialist, and if they want to go that path, and that means I think they are stuck with your startup. So that's the way I would see it. Maybe you should try to really see if you might want to hire someone who's really good at all that. I think that's I mean, being a generalist and specialist has its own pros and cons, right? So a specialist is way deeper, A generalist can manage, maybe even good at things, but you can't expect the same specialization or strength of execution as a specialist. So probably you should find someone who can be a reasonable generalist at the beginning, and then probably when you expand your startup, you get more funding, your product is launched and is getting some traction, your revenue streams are going good, maybe you're expanding, try to see if you can move away release some bottleneck on that individual who tried their best, right? That's just my opinion on how. Maybe I have no experience in startups, so probably I'm not maybe the right person to suggest anything on how startups should look at hiring or expanding design teams. But I think it has got its own baggage in terms of overloading, or even if not by workload, but in terms of the responsibility. If you give things that don't work out to certain people, I think things are going to stumble. So that would be my take on probably how it can be seen. When it comes to individuals, when it comes to designers and their career progression, it's up to how they want to see their future, whether in the same organization or somewhere else. On, do they want to continue being a generalist, or do they want to take a specialist track? It's all on an individual career choice.
Awesome. Um, let's talk about the skills and qualities that any aspiring designer should ideally have, because we are not always cut out in many cases. Like personally, I started out as a developer, but only it was over a period of time that I realized that I was probably not cut out for that role as much as I am for my current role of a business analyst. So it's very important to have an understanding very early on in your journey to see if you're the right fit for that role, because if it is, then you're going to have a really good career over a period of a few decades in that stream, or else you are probably going to resent at some point of time as to why you chose that field. So let's talk a little bit about some of the skills and personality traits that designers need to have. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I'll probably try to. I'll probably jump a little bit here and there between skills and personality. So I think the first and foremost I would like to start saying, even before I talk about skills and personality traits, is that I think software tools come in the end.
Yes.
So anybody who's trying to start a career in design, or thinking of what skills or traits to have, a lot of people confuse, thinking that developing usage skills, or being able to use dexterity, right? Basically getting a software tool dexterity feels very promising for a lot of aspiring designers. But my humble suggestion would be that don't worry about software. A piece of software can be learnt in a week, right? So a software tool is same as a screwdriver, or a scalpel, or whatever be the tool that you can think of. So in my opinion, that should be the last thing, because those can be picked up, and you pick up software tools based on purpose, not based on choice or preference or taste, right? So your tools change based on what you are trying to do. And then for a designer, like any other profession, the design profession also you need to make tool choices or software choices based on what you want to build. So like if you're getting into battle, if you want to go for an ambush, you pick an assault rifle. If you want to do close quarter combat, do some urban warfare, probably you're taking a submachine gun, right? So things vary. So you don't throw a hand grenade where you need to shoot at someone. A very destructive example. But so your tools, your arsenal should be based on your intent and purpose, and not just, that's not a reason to go ahead and become pick up a profession. So coming to what someone should have, right? This is just purely my thought, or probably that's what I think, that a lot of different people can come up with very rich takes on it. So I think you need to have a lot of hunger. So a lot of hunger to really go deeper into problems. So I mean, the world is bubbling with a lot of problem statements to solve, right? Everything starting from climate change to pollution, to any form of innovation that is happening. So many domains that need attention, starting from education, sanitation, manufacturing. So many things are out there. So I think anyone who wants to get into a career into design, or the skills that you should have, I think my first would be a lot of enormous hunger to be ready to solve problems, whatever is being thrown at you in whatever company you are working in or whatever team setup you have. I think that hunger should never die out. And I think that this applies for any profession.
Right.
But for a designer, I feel the day that hunger starts going down, I think you stop innovating. I think if that hunger goes down a little bit, I think you're probably not being your best self, or probably not doing justice to your profession. So that enormous hunger to solve problems, and then the curiosity to explore will be my first, in my mind, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. The second I can think of is the 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 attachment and the mindset to explore design situations. So hunger to solve problem is one thing, right? You are ready to solve problems. That's a great mindset already to have as a designer. What comes next in my head is you should be open to explore design situations. So when you get out in the field, when you interact with people, when you study your users, when you observe people using your product or probably using your competitors products, or even when you observe your users struggling to do something, right, a day-to-day task or something like that, a designer should definitely have that openness to explore design situations, and not jump into conclusions or solutions directly. Because when you are trying to explore design situations, when you're trying to explore for opportunities, that is where you are putting your hunger to use, right? You're trying to extend that hunger furthermore. You are really trying to see what more can be thrown at me, what are the opportunities that come to me, right, in terms of how I can make people's life better. So I think that is the second thing that comes to my mind, basically being open to explore and not jump into a lot of things. I think it's in general the human tendency is it's pretty much wired to, the moment you have a problem outline, the mind can immediately think of a solution. But I feel a designer should always resist that temptation, while console themselves that solutioning is going to happen. It's not running away. Solution is going to be a separate stage where there is going to be a lot of bandwidth to think of better solutions for the problem. But I think when I mean exploring design situations, it's more about trying to see what are the opportunities that are going to be thrown at us without any bias or without any preconceived jump into, oh, okay, what can fit in there, right? Let's discover the container first. Let's see the filling material later, right?
Yeah.
So that's probably the second thing that comes to my mind. So what comes next is uh, the mindset to kill your own ideas. So, right, apart from near and dear ones, the most difficult thing for someone to even kill is their own ideas, right? So a designer has to have a mindset to forget and erase their own ideas and not fall in love with them. So you should fall in love with your near and dear ones, your friends and colleagues and all of that, but not fall in love with your own ideas, right? You need to have the detachment to be rational about it, and also to be ready to forgive yourself for a bad idea, not feel very bad about it, right? Because that is part of the process. So trial and error is part of the process, ideation and iteration is part of the process. I think the 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 soulful mindset to throw away ideas is very important in my opinion. Because, like, let's say, yeah, you had the hunger, you explored your design situations, you have an opportunity, a problem statement, now you're sketching something, you're thinking something. If you start falling in love with the initial ideas, you're already stopping your journey right there, right?
Right.
Because that shows a great sense of rigidity, that okay, I wouldn't want to explore more, because you know what, I spent time sketching this, a lot of hard work has gone into it. No. So sketching is not hard work. Sketching is the exercise to the muscle. That's not the entire hard work. You're not working out yet, you're only warming up. So I think being able to kill ideas is very important, so that you can rework, erase. I think with that connects the whole side of being open to feedback, being able to take critique wisely, and then being very clear where not to take feedback and where to get feedback, because feedback can be thrown from all directions. So who gives feedback is very important. So I'll probably cover it in a separate point. So basically, the third part is around being able to kill your own ideas. I think I would not emphasize less on that, a lot more. Many times it should be said on being able to. That is why I think I suggest a lot of aspiring designers to sketch a lot. So when you get the power of sketching it on a piece of paper and you have to throw it out, you know that you can get back innovative again, right? You know what a bad idea is, you know what a good idea is. So your creative juices keep going. So I think that's the second part, being able to kill ideas. Sorry, the third one. And what next can I think of? The next thing that comes to my mind is, how do you handle feedback, right? And how do you evaluate feedback? So because feedback is a very important component of development or growth, and even shaping up something. But who you get feedback from is going to play a very big role, right? So there's a
Right.
huge difference between feedback from real users, feedback from peer group, feedback from your managers, feedback from your colleagues, or feedback from a passerby. Design is visual, right? You sketch something and put it on a wall, every random person going there can throw something at it, right? Now that's where I think designers should develop a lot of mindfulness and calmness in terms of trying to take feedback in the right spirit when it comes to you, in terms of be it a very harsh critique or a very polite feedback, however it comes. At the same time, be intelligent enough to process it and then see what has to be absorbed in and what should not be absorbed in. That's where one has to be very, very, very clear in terms of filtering feedback from opinions. So where feedback comes is going to decide, how do you want to act upon it, right? So I think these are some of the top things that come to my mind in terms of what mindsets at least designers should have. Speaking of skills, uh, I think we have covered it already in many of the areas we spoke about just now. So problem solving is a very important skill that designers need to have, right? They should never shy away from trying to step in and solve problems. Being able to apply logic, and there's a lot of skill overlap between an analyst or a business role versus a designer's role. So being able to analyze situations, being able to analyze the data that is thrown at you, right, and then make very, very logical interpretations out of it, trying to derive meaning out of it. So all those are some of the skills designers need to have, because without that happening, you can forget your interfaces. It's not going to happen anyway. You can forget your ideas. So I think problem solving capabilities, being able to think logically, and then I mean that it has to be a mix of the right and left brain. It's not one
Yes.
sided. So that's the beauty of design, right? So creativity cannot just exist without logic and reason. So that's my understanding of how designers should be working. And uh, and I think patience, I know patience is going to fall under mindset, but it shouldn't be skill. But patience should also be a skill that is cultivated, because
It's practiced over a period of time, right? It comes over a period of time. I don't think it's just the act of waiting, but I think that there is much more to it. I don't think that it's just something that comes with the first attempt. I think it has to be developed like any other probably habit or a routine over a period of time.
absolutely spot on. Because as a designer, you are not going to find results instantly, right? Just because you sketch an interface or you did something nice on the tool or whatever, right? Adobe XD or whatever tool you want to use, it doesn't mean that it qualifies to be implemented, or it doesn't mean that it qualifies to go live. It's going to take its own time to go through the process that we spoke about, be it usability testing or whatever has to go through, right? For example, something might simply not be feasible at all. It may be your developer said they are trying their best to build something, but when it comes to technological limitations, what can your development team even do, right? So I think that's one of the patience is a skill that I think a designer should always have, and that connects back on why also they should not rush to solutions. And uh, and uh, I, I think I think these are some of the things I can think of, and also always I've always seen a lot of designers having a tough time working with developers, and some of them I've seen where they have a tough time in trying to work with developers, not in terms of the workflow, but it's usually like, oh, developers don't understand this and understand that, and those kind of reactions. Apart from empathy is a very big word for designers, right? And they always need to have empathy for end users and human beings. I think designers should also have some empathy towards developers, because developers and engineers are doing their best job in trying to find a solution for you, a solution that you are trying to propose, or they're trying to build it, and they've got their own zone of creativity to materialize your idea. I think having some amount of empathy to tech as well goes a long way in terms of how you work with your team, and how do you try to materialize a solution as a team together. I
Right.
think these are some things that I think I can think of on what a designer should have in their mindset. And I mean, skills, I think there are a lot more skills. If we go to the technical skills, I think research skills are very important. Quantitative and qualitative analysis. uh, I think that list can go. I think that'll, in terms of techniques and things like that, will come, the usuals will come, which are part of the role itself. But other than this, I think these are some things good to have, if you really want to make a very strong career and go a long way.
Awesome, awesome. That's a great list, Ram. I think especially for students or aspiring designers who are just starting out and just having that spark in their mind to follow this field as a career, it's very important that we list out all of these things, because it's only the mindset that's going to get you through that. And having a passion is very very important for that specific field, because if you lack passion, then there is going to come a time where a lot of things will go wrong, not just in your professional life but also in your personal life, because they are so closely tied together. So I think it's very important to have a very good understanding of yourself, of your personality. So one good example that I can give is roles like that of a designer or a product manager or a business analyst. I think these are very very extroverted roles which require talking to a lot of people. So if you're really not comfortable talking to people and having difficult conversations, then it becomes very difficult for you to handle some of the feedback that you will potentially get, or you will find a lot of challenges in handling disappointment, and these eventually translate to a lot of negative things over a period of time. So it's very important to take a step back and have an honest conversation with yourself to see if you will really be able to uh, whether you will be able to step up and be up for those challenges, because they are going to come, and when they come, whether you are ready to face them or not. So on that note, let's get a little bit deeper into one specific area that I wanted your input on, which is having a moral and ethical compass as a designer. Because we talk about mindset, and a lot of that mindset has to do with how you deal with negative situations as well, and probably how you solve problems. So I have read a lot about dark patterns in US and in UX, and how um, you can use a little bit of what you call psychological operations or psyops to kind of mislead or have a negative influence on the kind of solutions that you're offering, because people don't realize it, right? Like if you take largely used products, I won't name any products, but if you use largely used or widely used products that have billions of consumers, these are designed by a very few, like I would say, just a very small group of designers, or even one designer in many cases, um, which have that butterfly effect, that translate to a large impact over a period of time. So it's the same for both good and dark products that rely on human weakness, and that manipulate users into using that product over a period of time. So what are your thoughts on designers having a moral and ethical compass when they approach their work?
Sure, Rahul. It's a very important topic. So I think, like the examples also that you were taking, right? So if I were to start with, I would definitely start by saying that designers need to start having an even more stronger moral and ethical compass than they have today. Uh, the reason I say that is that there are a lot of these products and services, like you said, they are already manipulating, either the dopamine effect, or they're trying to, play with your hormones, or they're trying to leverage the inherent human weaknesses that arise out of our biological wiring, right? Now, designers need to start thinking what their businesses are asking for. I am not talking about a revolt or a resistance or something like that, but it's about what do you have close to your heart in terms of what you're trying to build with your team or for your team or with your product team or your startup or a bigger organization or whatever. And now I've seen some designers who are very passionate about their craft, right? They're very good at what they're doing. They're very good with their skills, and they're very good with what they're working on. But a lot of them are chased by or probably driven and fueled by the business need, which is very legitimate in terms of because in general, as long as you're not a non-profit or you're not working for a social cause or something other than those, you're trying to be profitable anyway, right? A business needs to be profitable, a business needs to generate revenue, you need to have multiple revenue streams if possible, you need to keep doing something, right? So but where I think designers need to look at their moral compasses is trying to see, apart from being in a healthy profitable state, what is your business trying to do, right? And then how does that translate into the decisions that go into what is expected out of you, or are you expected to be cunningly creative, right? So you were speaking of dark patterns. How did dark patterns come into existence, right? Like you were saying, either the big examples or small examples, somebody made a choice, right? Somebody made a choice to say that, you know what, I'll keep the tappable area of the close button really small, so
Yeah.
that you tap 3 times, only then it listens, right? Somebody made a choice. There's an interface component, it's an advertisement, it has got a message, it's popping at you, you're making it difficult to tap consciously, right? So how does that happen? So I think it comes down to designers. I think the first thing, if it is talking about the moral and ethical compass, the first thing I think designers should think of is at least be aware of it being non-ethical, right?
Yes.
So that is where designers, or not just designers, anybody, any profession, I mean, whatever we are speaking through this podcast is for everybody, every profession, is that designers should not be boggled down or buried between the business jargons which drive these kind of decisions. So for example, if yes, definitely your business needs conversion, no doubt, right? But if your business says that, you know what, to increase my conversion, I would like to do XYZ, which is darker than how it is supposed to be. No, that is where designers need to be educated and aware, probably sensitized to say no to those kind of decisions and why that is non-ethical. So that is one part where designers need to start. And there's a lot of research papers, there are a lot of literature already that can talk about existing dark patterns or existing unethical practices. So interestingly, I think at this point of the time, I mean, uh, designers should start thinking about what has tap to refresh or swipe to refresh has done to humanity, right? Now people who build that are already regretting why they built that.
Yes.
And I mean, the infinite scroll, right? All of those patterns which are holding up us like anything. So designers need to first get sensitized and be aware of what is a dark pattern and what is unethical. And I mean, and also surveillance capitalism, for example. So
Yes.
how do designers play a role in, if not be a direct moderator of it, but at least play a role in being a strong voice against how data is being used, right? I mean, if you're part of a big corporation or a small corporation, there is always data, there is always usage data, there is analytics, every form of data is open to you, right? And the moment you say that, the more there is awareness for design as a profession, the more people know that you need data anyway to do your work every day, right? So if you say you're a UX designer, people these days, teams are mature enough to know that, oh yeah, I think you need analytics, I'll give you access to it. It goes without saying, right? They know that you would want to do some testing, they know that you want to do some click through data or something like that. Now apart from being sensitized about dark patterns and unethical practices, I think designers need to be a little aware more on how is the data being used within their organization. And then wherever the need be, they need to raise their voice and then bring it right there on why are we being unethical and things like that. And I think the last point that I would like to talk about is very much connected to the first point about being sensitized and being aware, it is also about your choice on whether you want to play along with it or do you want to say no to it, right? Nobody is holding your hand, of course. It's a question of, in the end, it comes to personal choice and whether someone wants to resist or want to go about it or not. But but what I would like to say there is the choice is always going to be binary. You can either choose to or not, right? And now for that matter, designers need to be aware of the kind of content they consume through their learning. I think this can be a separate topic by itself on basically where do you learn from, right? What are your sources? So who tells you that if you were to design a particular sign up screen in a certain way, you can increase more conversion, and the n number of things that you can do on the sign up screen to increase conversion, to what point is the barometer for ethical design holding tight or exploding, right? That is where designers need to, I mean, the first point is about being sensitized and aware. So the more you are sensitized and aware, the more chances are there that you figure out really well on is something even right or not, right? And then you have people to talk to. There are a lot of literature around ethical design, dark patterns, and everything. But that sensitization is going to definitely make you make the choice between building something a certain way or not. So when we say how do we build habit forming products and how to keep people hooked, we need to think about, okay, is my intent to make something addictive, right? Do I really need to make something addictive? Is this what my organization is trying to do? Do we really want to make something addictive, right? And then if we are trying to make something addictive, what addiction am I giving to my end users, right? What morals are we carrying at the moment to say that we want to build habit forming products and things like that, right? So I think that choice is something designers, I mean, it's going to be personal in the end, and at the same time on the professional front. But I think that choice is something people need to make before they jump into all the details when they say that. And for that matter, even things like gamification, and then patterns around people who bought this also bought this, right? So what are you trying to do? I'm purchasing a TV. Why are you giving me something? Why are you showing me a washing machine or something like that, right? So advertisement, how do you sneak in content somewhere here and there? I mean, there are passive ones, there are really dirty ones. Everything exists in the realm of dark patterns. I mean, we should definitely see it as black and white and not gray. uh, Something that is dark is totally dark. There's nothing polite or in fact, I take my words back, I shouldn't say anything passive about it. Something that is bad is extremely bad, right? So I think that's something designers should keep in mind on what they do, and they need to be very observant of the work they do, right? So to what extent do you go for conversion? Yes, conversion is important for a profitable business. Do you fool your users and go for conversion, or do you play around with their dopamine and then go ahead for conversion? Or are you trying to put forward a simple statement of the amazing quality your business or your product offers and then go for conversion?
Right.
So I think that's I think probably I would like to end that with the hold that designers can have in terms of how they think and how they process the problem statement that is thrown at them, and especially how they go ahead with a solution towards it. Be open to say no, or be open to say explain on why something is unethical. And of course, in the end, it's a personal choice, which I hope everyone makes the right choice.
Yeah, I think these are very important points that you're making, because I don't want to sound sinister to those who are listening, but every time we make a wrong choice or a wrong decision, our inner compass gets a little bit skewed, and then that builds up over a point of time, and that eventually shows up how we are currently seeing today, where a lot of designers who have worked for big organizations and have really played with these dopamine levels and have actually manipulated users into doing something that has harmed them or really not been in the best interest of their users. I think it has haunted them, and that guilt has accumulated over a period of time, and it's finally come out in the form of these leaks that we are seeing very periodically. So it's very important to have a very clear conscience, and having a very strong ethical and moral compass, and not skew it with the wrong things that you do. Of course, there are many, it's very easy to say and very difficult to practice, because at the end of the day we all need some form of living to survive. And there are a lot of other factors that are out of our control, especially when it comes to working for big corporations, where we see that, or where designers and other roles also are required to things that are really not ethically right or morally right. um, but the best thing that you can do, as Ram you mentioned, is to at least speak up. That's the least that you can do from your part, or at least try to understand why certain things are being asked of you. And if they don't feel right, then the right forum needs to be identified to kind of express your thoughts. Um, because at least I think that's the best that you can do in certain situations, or the least that you can do in certain situations. So I think that pretty much sums it up. So over the past almost 2 hours, we have covered a lot of points, which I hope have added a lot of value to those who get to listen to this. So one last point before we end, Ram, is where is the ideal starting point, or what should be the ideal starting point of those who are looking to venture into this domain? It can be in the form of um, books that they should read, habits that they should develop, or just general um, thoughts or conversations that they need to have with themselves or with people. What would you recommend as the ideal first step, as people look to venture into this space?
Sure, Rahul. So I think there are both kinds of designers and pretty good designers in the both kind. There are people who come from an academic background, with a design degree either in the undergrad or masters, and there are people who are self-taught and they come from different career backgrounds, and then they are switched into a design and they're doing really well. So both kinds exist and both are really successful. My advice, since I've got a chance, or probably I should say I was fortunate enough to have an academic exposure, my initial suggestion would be that it's not like degree matters or does not matter. It's not about that kind of an argument. It's not about getting a stamping or a tag or something like that. It's more about the academic exposure. It's more about learning from some esteemed faculty and things like that. My starting point suggestion would be that if you have the time and bandwidth, give it a shot. If you can go for an MFA or MDes or an MSc or whatever be your specialization, whether you want to focus on what kind of design. Since we are talking about the IT side of it with this audience, I think give it a shot if you can try for something around HCI or a design degree. But if you're not able to get through the examinations or entrance, or if you don't have time and availability or budget or whatever, and if you have decided that you want to try and become your own self-taught designer, that's an amazing path by itself too. uh, I think if you go for a design degree, I think the shape up will be different. It's not like the college is going to feed you with a lot of things, but at least you have a group to interact with, the setup and the environment to nurture yourself in 1 or 2 years. But if you start becoming a self-taught designer, I think it's very important where you start your journey from. And my word of advice would be choose your mentors very wisely, because given the information explosion we have about design on the internet, there are thousands of medium blogs, and there's so many design podcast and the design yarn coming on YouTube. And as a starter, you might not have any idea on what is right and wrong. My only advice would be not to be fed by the wrong sources, or be very careful in choosing your design mentors, and their look at their credentials, uh, you know uh, who they are and things like that. So, and I think irrespective whether you go to a design school or you're self-taught, I think choosing your design mentors anyway matters a lot. uh, Books, I think, would be the fundamental. So you need to read the right books and not be carried away by it. In the age of micro learning and micro universities all around, so there are a lot of medium articles. There are a lot of, I mean, everything is useful. There are a lot of nice medium articles. I'm not against medium articles or something. There are amazing medium articles which I myself have found a lot of value in. But if you're starting, I think getting your fundamentals right is very, very important. So that is a stage where you should not be filled with half-baked information, or random podcast which talk about, because there are a lot of YouTubers these days who are putting a lot of emphasis on tools. Right? Some time ago, I heard someone say that you master Figma, you're set forever and all of that. You need to create a couple of screens for Figma and all that. So it's very important to moderate this kind of content that comes to you. Books are very much reliable because books are anyway rooted in academics, but you can read on your own on the Kindle, or you buy a copy or online or whatever. And then uh, look at sources that are more credible. So that way, even if your plan is to get into design is about an internship and then getting a job and things like that, choose your trajectory very wisely. That way, a nice mentor, no matter you have a design degree or not, a good mentor is very important on, or at least your sources of information on who's guiding you in terms of how do you want to go about with a design career, right? So that is very important. And books very much, books and research papers are very very important. I mean, if you're not able to go to a design school, or for whatsoever reason, I think you can always look at how the overall curriculum looks like, right? So because the curriculum is structured for a certain reason, and each alumni or student might have their own rants about why their curriculum is good or bad, but in the end it's all good. Nobody's going to spoon feed anyone anyway, right? So an academic setup gives you a framework and an environment to be more connected. But if you're self taught, that is also fine. There's nothing different about it. It's just that you need to do that extra work to set up the environment for yourself, find your sources really well, and then things like that. I think that would be my I mean, there's positive as well as negative. And find your sources really well from where you consume the knowledge and information. Don't be pulled into all these pseudo knowledge or half baked design yarn that is propagating all around, because anybody with a mic and then a YouTube channel has become a design yarn guru these days. So I would advise people to stay away from, be very careful at evaluating, look at their credentials, who they are, the content they write and all that. So to avoid all of that, I think starting with books is really better, so that you have first-hand knowledge from really renowned authors. And there are amazing books. I think in case you're going to upload it in YouTube or something, this podcast, I can even send a list of books that are pretty good when it comes to design and stuff. I think that's something I would advise for starters. And see if you can get an internship opportunity, because I think without an experience and portfolio, it's going to be very hard to get a job. So, like, I'm talking about literally someone who is trying to jump into design with no background of it or something like that. Your knowledge base and learning and reading should be very intense in the very beginning, so that you get all your fundamentals really right. So basically, you don't want to be struggling after taking an internship or an entry level job and then figuring out the basics. That's going to be really really disastrous, because you have a job on top of you. At the same time, if you struggle to get your basics right, that's going to be very painful. So I think that would be my suggestion. And start, I think that the usual would be to start with a portfolio and all of that. I would again say, work your portfolio through. Don't rush into your portfolio just for the sake of putting up some visuals or screen. Let the portfolio take its time. The portfolio is like a baby. It has to go through those months of growth. The baby can't just like that pop up out of nowhere, right? It has to grow. So the portfolio is same as that. So give it time. Don't be boggled down by peer pressure on somebody else doing an amazing portfolio and this and that. So because the kind of good work that you put on your portfolio matters, rather than how your portfolio looks by itself. I think that would be one advice. Let the portfolio take its time. Don't rush to it. Even if your portfolio has got two projects, but those projects are real world problems, well thought through, they look like real case studies, if not like a mashup of screens. That's going to speak a lot on the parts that we spoke about: your hunger, your acumen to be open to design situations. So so that way, I would advise not to rush into portfolio while you keep working on it, because you need some real work to put on your portfolio, right? And hypothetical case studies you can think of, but I mean, I wouldn't call them case studies. They are hypothetical screens or whatever. But even if you were to do it, do some real world work. So even if you're struggling, go ahead, find some time, talk to people on the streets, or I mean, if you're building a restaurant app, go to a restaurant, do the protocol, take permission and things like that. I mean, do things right. Don't rush
Right.
into random Facebook redesign or LinkedIn redesign, or just for the sake of it. And my advice would be to stay away from you know unwanted inspiration in the very beginning. Like, you can get inspired by looking at some work here and there, it's good. Like if you want to pick up some visual design skills, you can look at things and stuff, but don't be heavily influenced by the kind of work that's out there, because in the end real work is driven by real people and real problems. So you can see, you can be turned on by a lot of things on things like Dribble and YouTube and Behance and all of that, but I think take it slow, don't be affected a lot by the so-called cool interfaces or something. Amazing visual design is something you can also achieve with practice and with the right knowledge, but uh, let's not mix learning and explosion of expertise in one go. So that would be my advice for people who are starting. And then, yeah, like I said, find some good mentors, or keep your guidance channel which is pretty reliable. Don't have unreliable guidance channels. I think that would be very helpful.
Awesome. Great, great. I think that pretty much sums it up very well around what prospective or aspiring designers should look at. So, um, thank you for all the advice and information that you have given over the course of this interview, Ram. I really hope that once this is out, those who listen to it or watch this interview will take away some value, and uh, hopefully they can find the first logical step. So just to sum it up, I think there is a lot of noise around design today. So before you go ahead and make your first step, I think it's very, very important to take your own time to identify the right resources, the right mentors, and the right path that you want to follow on. Of course, there are a lot of arbitrary things that need to go right for you to grow into this career. But from your side, I think uh, the preparation that you make has to be very, very thorough, and your thought process around who you are as a designer has to be very clear, and what you want to do has to be clear, so that tomorrow when there are any obstacles that come your way, you are able to smoothly navigate your way around those challenges. So I think that's the message that we want to get out there through this interview. So thanks once again for your time, Ram.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share some thoughts I had on this platform, and good luck with the podcast series, and my best wishes for a lot of interesting talks from a lot of different people. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye bye.